Own the Road with Kelli and Bob, the USA250 Tour, brought to you by Mueller.
We, the people of the United States of America.
Hi, and thanks for joining us for this episode of On the Road with Kelli and Bob. I'm Kelli Phillips.
And I'm Bob Phillips. This is a special series we're going to be doing all year long during 2026. We call it the USA250 Tour, and it's a celebration of the 250th birthday of the founding of the United States of America. The first story of this series is likely nothing you are expecting. It's about a place in eastern Louisiana, a place that wasn't even a part of the United States until the Jefferson presidency and the Louisiana Purchase. But during the time we're talking about, well, it wasn't part of any country at all, at least not one we know about.
So why do we start our celebration of America's birthday here? Well, because it's the oldest known settlement where people who are indigenous to what would become the USA lived. It's called Poverty Point.
I grew up starting early on in New Orleans, uptown, and then my parents moved to Slidell, north of the lake. That's where I did most of my growing up. I like school. I like learning about history and prehistory and science. I did my degrees first, undergraduate in history at Springhill College, and then did my grad work at Queen's University Belfast in Northern Ireland. But when I moved back home, I started looking for stuff I could do and stuff that I cared about, and ended up at Poverty Point.
Mark Brink Jr. always knew his life would revolve around our history. He just didn't know early on how far back that history would go.
As it turns out, Mark is the manager at a place called Poverty Point, a Louisiana state park and a World Heritage site. And what does that mean? Well, simply put, it means this place is very important, even though our knowledge of what went on here barely scratches the surface.
What do you know about Poverty Point?
Not a lot.
I don't know that a lot of people know about Poverty Point unless you're in your business.
And why do you think that is?
Well, you're kind of remote.
Okay,
And
there's true.
It's not taught in the history books.
Right. This is the important part. You know about remote places around the world because they're in the history books.
Right.
Why can this site not be in a history book?
You got to tell us because we wonder the same thing.
Because there's no written record. We know about the pyramids because there is a written record of these things being built. The people who built them or wrote these things down. You learn about this sort of stuff through the realm of archaeology instead of history. Without a written record to go with it, there is no narrative that can be made of the native peoples who lived here, what they called themselves, or why they built things specifically. So instead, archaeologists have the very tough job of doing things not very much from the top down, but from the bottom up.
They have to build that story from what they find here?
Yeah, what they find here, and not just the artifacts or the things people left behind. Most of the important record is the dirt itself.
The dirt?
Huh?
Yeah. You dig a hole in the ground. Where is the oldest stuff going to be in that hole?
Very bottom.
Where's the youngest stuff going to be?
The very top.
So the layers tell your story of when stuff was left behind. You can see evidence for how quickly or how slowly is something built. If there is a natural disaster or a flood, you would see evidence in the record.
Okay, so we could write a book about what we do not know about Poverty Point, but that's not the point, because, well, the real point here at Poverty Point is how long it's been here.
And that information is nothing short of astounding, because we know that people were inhabiting this place almost 2,000 years BC.
People had been digging and studying the site here for at least 100 years.
The indigenous people.
Yeah, the native peoples, indigenous peoples, American Indians, and they've been here for thousands and thousands and thousands of years.
Take us back. How far back do we know right now that this place, has been here?
The earliest dates from radiocarbon dating at Poverty Point that are generally accepted go to about 1700 BCE, and then the dates run up to about 1100 BCE or so. So the peoples were living on the landscape that surrounds us here for roughly 600 years.
What we do know about Poverty Point is that the people who lived or visited here were involved in a mind-blowing piece of engineering where they built these huge mounds of dirt. One as high as almost 100 feet tall, covering more than 8 acres.
That's almost 400,000 tons of dirt they moved here. And we have no idea why they did it.
Who were these people?
They're native folks that lived here 3,500 years ago. And the peoples who lived here were part of a wider culture of different communities throughout the lower Mississippi Valley, down to the Gulf Coast, and other parts of the Southeast, maybe the Tennessee River Valley, parts of the lower Midwest and the Mid-South, who believed in a number of different things and had things in common with each other. We call them the Poverty Point culture, for lack of a better word. And back in the day, archaeologists were sure that the people living here were creating the culture, but the culture may have existed even before the site was being created. This certainly was the apex of the culture. This became the most important site of the culture.
Do we know about when this all started going away as far as this being the gathering place for these people?
We see a lack of evidence of occupation around 1100 BC or so.
And then how long before Europeans came to this area as far as we know?
3,000 years later.
Now, unless you're an archaeologist, anthropologist, or historian, Poverty Point is probably not the most exciting place in the world. It's not Disneyland. There are no games for the kids.
But if you care about our shared history, if you ever wonder what this world was like long before any of us, or for most of us, even our ancestors, set foot on the land that would become our home, if you want to know the history before it was written down, this could be the place for you, just like it is for Mark Brink Jr.
Does this not drive your wondering mind crazy, not knowing the answer to all of that?
It doesn't drive me crazy
It's
at all.
driving me crazy.
To not know.
I think that was my initial response, but we have to be okay not knowing all the answers. What I'm here to do is connect you to this ancient site and give you a sense of why this matters, what makes it so important. But through the process of archaeology, especially with a site this old, without a written record of what happened, I'm just not going to know the answers. Archaeologists have the task of creating a connect-the-dots puzzle. Have you ever done a connect-the-dots puzzle?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you're missing 90% of the dots. What does the picture look like?
Oh, not much.
Just an outline.
And then you have to do work to fill in the dots you're missing. And so in today's world, we're using a tremendous amount of new technology and new techniques in order to fill in the rest of what's missing. Regardless of what I do not know, what I do know is that this is one of the most important archaeological sites in the world.
Now, there's so much more to know about Poverty Point and why it's here and what its significance was and why it's important even today.
Let's start that conversation with learning exactly who these people were and what they did here.
Well, first of all, they lived fairly comfortably. Based on the evidence, it looks like at least several hundred people were living here year-round. And they began to create mounds and earthworks after several decades of there being people here.
Mounds.
Yeah.
Explain. I mean, I'm thinking
Yeah.
mound, and
Yes,
that's what it
that's what it
means.
is. It's a
And
pile
for
of dirt.
what?
What
Why does somebody
purpose?
build a mound?
I don't know. We're still figuring it out.
You don't know. You just
Yeah.
know that they did this.
We know that they did this. In fact, the big mounds themselves contain remarkably little evidence of what happened after they were constructed.
Are there any guesses or, conjecture? Or,
Not anything very specific. So I can tell you a lot about what a mound is not,
Okay.
especially not at Poverty Point. So we don't find evidence of people living on the big mounds. Okay. So there's not trash deposits or midden, which is organic stuff that gets left behind over time, like
midden.
yeah,
Okay.
like plant remains, like
Yeah.
rotten plant remains. You'd find animal bones. You'd find trash or like flakes of stone, little artifacts in the midden. You don't find post holes on the tops of the big mounds after they're built, meaning there's no structures on top. So there's not a temple or a house for an important person. You don't find burials inside these mounds. So we know a lot about what they are not. What we're left with is a flat, open mound, or sometimes a conical mound that was used for some kind of purpose by the ancient people.
Can you describe the size of these mounds?
Okay. So let's go through the site, one piece at a time.
Okay.
Right now, the visitor center which we sit is a small part of the plaza. Okay. It covers about 43 acres. Okay. It's semi-oval in construction, and it's built. The central plaza covers 43 acres, and the ancient people brought in roughly 175,000 cubic yards of earth to fill in this plaza, to creating a flatter, higher level surface. There's 6 ridges built outside of the plaza, okay, and they're nested, starting with Ridge 1, which was likely built as early as 1530 BC. That's the oldest date we have from around there, and likely built fairly slowly, with another ridge built outside of it sometime after that point, and then 4 other ridges that were built later on in the period, and they're all semi-oval in construction. Now, there's currently archaeology ongoing to sample different parts of the ridges to understand when each part is built and how quickly and or slowly they're also being constructed. But I would imagine we're going to see differences from one ridge to the next. Outside of those 6 ridges are the 3 of the largest mounds. There is a platform mound that's called Mound E, and it covers almost 2 acres of space. It's 13 feet high, and it's big and flat on the top.
That's a lot of dirt.
Yeah, it is a lot of dirt. But Mound A is a lot more dirt. So that mound is built around 3,500 years ago, sometime just after 1500 BC. Mound A is built roughly 300 yards to the north of it, and it's a lot more dirt. Okay, it covers an area of just over 8 acres or so, and it's roughly T-shaped, and it contains 390,000 tons of dirt.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, the apex, the tallest part, is around 72 feet high. But when the mound was first built, sometime just after 1350 BC, it was likely between 90 and 100 feet tall. And the site has had 3,000 plus years of natural erosion. So we're going to have some loss of definition and height in all these mounds. And then the northernmost of the big 3 is roughly 600 yards north of Mound A, and it's called Mound B. And it's a circular-based mound with a conical shape, around 21 feet high today.
So probably the entire history of this place, all of the dots will not be covered in our lifetime.
Maybe ever.
Maybe ever.
Yeah, maybe ever.
Look,
and that's
Mark,
okay.
have you tried just plugging all this information into Google and asking AI?
Like AI?
Surely it'll just tell you what the answer is, right?
Unfortunately, it doesn't. AI can't do that. It can only take what is. It cannot create anything new.
Okay, I've
so
got to
AI
ask.
actually does a terrible job of explaining what the site is.
I can't wait
Yeah.
to do that and see what it comes back with. I really can't.
Yeah, AI also doesn't do a good job of separating fact from fiction. It takes the whole body of what's been said about a place or a site and unfortunately
Mixes it together.
Yeah. The ancient people who lived here roughly 3,500 years ago built the largest mounds and earthworks in North America. Okay. They were not farmers. These were hunters and fishers and gatherers. As far as we can tell, there are no larger monuments or earthworks ever built by hunters and gatherers in the world, not on the size or the scale. So a site like this one tells us about the ancestors of the tribes and nations who conducted the greatest engineering possible as a hunter and a gatherer. Okay, and in fact, it's not just about indigenous peoples, because for most of our prehistory or history, we were hunters and gatherers.
And how tall did you say the tallest mound is? Mound A?
Mound A is 72 feet high at its apex.
How in the world
Yeah.
would you get? I mean,
You take a bag and basket and you walk and you dump it out.
basket at a time.
Yeah, right. The central plaza was used as a place to gather, to dance, to sing, to conduct, ceremony and ritual, hang out with your friends, exchange with other peoples who were coming from across the rest of North America back in the day. But it's a clean space because it's multifunctional. Just like a field today, you could play football on it. You could also have a crafts fair. You could have a concert on it. Now they are building timber circles throughout parts of the plaza. So these are wooden structures, wooden timbers, dug into the ground and arranged in rings. And these are being built, removed, and replaced over a period of over 500 years on the site. So we can date these features using radiocarbon dating. Yeah.
But again, we don't know what those were for.
Again, we don't know what they're for. I can tell you what the timber circles are not. And we don't think that they're used for astronomy. And the reason for that is because, first of all, they're lacking a center post. At other sites, if you find a ring like that in a center post, they could be used as a calendar, with the shadows being casted for different times of the year, what have you. And unlike Stonehenge, there's not archways and other features where you would stand and view, say, solstices or equinoxes.
Yeah.
So I know that they're not used for that. Now, where we do find artifacts are the 6 ridges that surround the plaza itself. So we still estimate that there are likely tens of millions of artifacts throughout the ridges.
Tens of millions.
Still left.
Right, because when people live, they leave stuff behind.
Yeah.
Where do y'all keep your artifacts?
In our house.
In your house,
Yeah.
shed outside your house, sometimes in your yard.
Yeah.
And people haven't changed. You keep your stuff, your valuables, in the house or really close by.
So you're finding jewelry.
Yeah, so beads.
Beads.
They're making beads here, either out of red stone called jasper or copper. We do find copper beads being brought here, or the copper being brought in raw form and then shaped. And the stuff we're seeing actually being manufactured on site. So we can find stages of manufacture.
Here at Poverty Point. Okay.
Hunter, gatherer, manufacturer.
Right. They're making stuff.
Yeah.
They're making things.
I like
Pottery?
creator.
Is there pottery that you?
There is some pottery here. Now, much of the pottery that has been rediscovered is imported. So some of the pottery is definitely coming in finished form. And some of this pottery comes from closer to the Atlantic coast, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Some comes from as far away as Florida, like in the Atlantic coast of Florida.
Any conjecture on why here?
We're sitting on an elevated ridge, a natural ridge called the Mason Ridge,
Okay.
that is a high point throughout the floodplain that surrounds us. In fact, if you look on the eastern side of the site here, you'll see a big bluff that goes into the water below. That is the edge of this ridge. So they live on the very eastern edge of this high point, okay, that does not flood and hasn't flooded in roughly 14,000 years, but they have easy access to the waterways, so the water is right there, and the floodplains beyond. And this is what ecologists call an ecotone. So it is a place that straddles different environments, and you have access to more and different and more varied resources. So that's important for a hunter, fisher, and gatherer too.
Do we think that this was a gathering point for more than one tribe of people?
I think that would be pretty safe to say, if you want to use the word tribe. But the chiefdoms that existed thousands of years later did not exist during this ancient time. But certainly groups of people, different communities would have been gathering here, along with the year-round inhabitants of this ancient site. But their way of organization was entirely different to the chiefdoms and probably the tribes and nations that came afterward and into today's world. But here you have the occupational component, meaning likely hundreds of people living here throughout the year. You have lots of more people coming for parties and maybe even mound construction. So people coming here to share things with the inhabitants, and the inhabitants sharing things with them. We're not finding direct evidence of stuff made at Poverty Point where all the rocks and other materials are coming from. So either the people living here were going out and acquiring it, or quarrying different rocks and materials and bringing it back, or folks are coming from those areas and sort of, bringing stuff as gifts to share. And they might want to be here for religious reasons, for social reasons. It's fun to have a party, for instance, and maybe they're just party favors. So it's the most exciting place in North America. Why would you want to be in your village all the time? All the people, all the excitement was here.
It was all here.
Yeah, it was the place to be and the place to be seen if you were anyone in North America 3,500 years ago.
Are we finding remnants of people?
No, in fact, we haven't found any human remains from the ancient period.
Then how do we know they were here?
They built stuff. They left things behind. But not everyone buries their dead. And in fact, it would be kind of weird if we found burials here, because it wasn't part of indigenous practice, at least in this area or this time. None of these other cultural sites contain burials or even cremations. So it looks like the folks are taking care of their dead, but they're doing it in a way that doesn't leave remains. Maybe a water burial, that's one thing that's suggested, or some form of sky burial. So with a water burial, laying your ancestors out in the water, letting people float down or do what they do naturally. And animals can help take care of your ancestors in that way too. With a sky burial, it's the opposite. You lay people out on the surface, or who knows, on a mound or a platform, and let the birds take care of your ancestors. And if you're not burying the bones in either of these options, you might not be left with anything today.
That story opens up the door for all the people who think that aliens were here and did this, right? You probably hear that sometimes, right?
I try not to. It doesn't give folks enough credit if you believe in the aliens doing this. Where are the laser beams? Where's the advanced technology that you would expect to find from extraterrestrials? Never been found. Not here, not at the pyramids, not at Machu Picchu, not at the Great Wall of China, not anywhere. So that seems just silly to me.
Archaeologists are constantly digging here.
Okay, yeah.
They find something new. Okay. What does that do for you? Do you get excited about that the story now has a new take?
Yeah, I do. I do like it. But we do have to temper our excitement.
Because?
Because the story can take a long time to be told correctly. And if I start to tell the story wrong, that enters the public imagination. And that takes a long time to correct. So for example, do y'all think that Vikings were buried in burning ships?
Well, I've heard that.
You've heard it, right.
But
it's not true.
Yeah.
It's never been found to be true. There's a lot of these ideas about the past that were mistakenly put out there, and they stay in our collective memories.
Well, it looks good in the movies.
But archaeology is tedious.
Yes.
It is not fast work,
No.
nor can it be. Because for every hour you're out there at an excavation unit, you're probably spending at least 10 hours in the lab trying to make sense of what you're seeing. And it might surprise folks to learn that we don't have a single arrowhead on display in the museum because peoples did not use bows and arrows. Archaeologists in North America prefer to call these projectile points as a catch-all term. And during this period, they're used as knife blades, they're used as spear points, and they're mostly used as dart points. So darts that are launched with a tool that we call an atlatl today. But bows and arrows were only fully popular maybe 1,500 years after Poverty Point existed as a site. So being fully adopted by the native cultures between 5 and 700 AD or CE. You'll come to check out the museum that contains thousands of artifacts from the site. And it's really just a small fraction of what we have in curation. So it shows you samples of different stone tool technologies, whether they be the projectile points or the stone axes, which are called celts, or different soapstone bowls that people used, along with lots of the jewelry, whether they be beads or pendants. You'll see some iconography, so ancient art. You'll see lots of Poverty Point objects as well. And a Poverty Point object is a shaped earthen ceramic ball that ancient people heated to cook food. Throughout most of the rest of North America at the time, people used hot rock cooking. And at a site like this, without native rocks, they created their own artificial ones in order to cook in the same way. Because all the rocks that they did bring in, they didn't want to heat over the fire because that would destroy your working material. So instead, they would create useful stone tools instead. So you can take a guided tour with us. As long as the weather permits, they run Wednesday through Sunday at 10 o'clock, 11:30, 1 p.m., and 3 p.m. And you'll see the entire site starting from the plaza, the ridges, all the big mounds, back again to the visitor center, checking everything out. Myself or a ranger will talk you through the interpretation of each of the different mounds and earthworks along the way. Or you can do so in your own vehicle if you're short on time. So it's the same loop you would take on the tram with myself or a ranger. Or you can take a hike. So the hike is a 2.6 mile loop. If you have an hour and a half or 2 hours to spend, I definitely recommend that way.
You'll see more.
You'll see more, you'll get a lot more up close and personal. And in either of the self-guided options, you are full of the interpretation because I have comprehensive booklets that match the numbered markers on either trail.
Why should people care about this as far as you're concerned?
Why wouldn't anyone care? This is exciting. This is part of the shared past and understanding. And if you care about where you come from or where people come from and what we're capable of, Poverty Point is a must-see.
In a way, at some point, we may determine that these people are our ancestors. We just don't know, right?
Yeah, well, they're indigenous folks. So if you have native ancestry, certainly you share ancestry with the folks who lived here, okay? And that's likely regardless of your tribe or nation, if you are indigenous, because the folks lived 3,500 years ago. And genetics have a tree, right? Wide roots. So the peoples who lived here are likely the ancestors of dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of tribes and nations that exist in the United States today.
What do you want people to take away when they come here?
Yeah, when they come and visit and see all this, what do you want them to take back with them?
That people have always been capable of greatness. The story is that the native peoples, when they arrived here, they reshaped the earth and the image they liked. They started by creating the mounds, by creating the ridges, by creating the plaza, until they created something completely artificial. In fact, the native peoples who lived here created an entirely man-made landscape. And it is true that if you, as an outsider, would enter this site for the first time, you would leave the natural world behind, and you entered the only landscape that was built by people. And that was true for over 2,000 years, until a larger site was created, the Cahokia site.
Is this the dream job for you?
It's certainly a dream job. I like a lot of things, but no, this one's pretty awesome. It is rare to work with a site that is so important, because I mean, you have thousands and thousands and thousands of mountains throughout North America, and in my opinion, I don't think any is as important as Poverty Point, except for maybe the Cahokia site. Moundville's another important one if you want to go out to Alabama, and there's a few others that really are in that really important zone, but none are built by hunters and gatherers like this one. The people can't talk about their site anymore. I am just an in-between. I'm just trying to bring this story to you, regardless of how I feel about it. And what I'm giving you today is, hopefully not really my opinion, but the consensus of what we've learned through the world of archaeology so far. And what we are learning will probably change things in the future. So the story I'm telling you is a story of right now. It is not the story of 10 years from now, as we're doing a lot more work to better understand this ancient site. Through excavation, through geophysical survey, through sampling the dirt itself, and analyzing artifacts and other sorts of materials to better get a sense of what the ancient life was like here. They're native folks that lived here 3,500 years ago. And the peoples who lived here were part of a wider culture of different communities throughout the lower Mississippi Valley, down to the Gulf Coast, and other parts of the Southeast, maybe the Tennessee River Valley, parts of the lower Midwest and the Mid-South, who believed in a number of different things and had things in common with each other. We call them the Poverty Point culture, for lack of a better word. And back in the day, archaeologists were sure that the people living here were creating the culture, but the culture may have existed even before the site was being created. This certainly was the apex of the culture. This became the most important site of the culture that these folks were creating. We do have a story. We have the story of the archaeology and what we've rediscovered so far. So the nomination paperwork, or the document, is about this thick. Yeah, and it showcases the site, and it also compares it to other sites, not just locally, but around the world, and comparing information and significance, and including rubrics of basically like checkboxes. What do these sites have, and what does Poverty Point have? Poverty Point, in a lot of cases, has a lot more interesting stuff going on than a lot of these other ancient sites.
I personally find it, and I've been there a few times, more interesting than Stonehenge.
I would agree.
Because I go out there and I see it and it's there, but that's it. I mean, it's
you could fit like 30 Stonehenges just inside the plaza of Poverty Point.
Yeah.
You know, this is a lot larger in scale and in significance.
And thanks for listening to this week's edition of On the Road with Kelli and Bob. The USA250 Tour will be visiting all 50 states during this 250th birthday of America. Why don't you head on over to our Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube page. Like, follow, and subscribe. That way you won't miss a thing. And you can listen to On the Road with Kelli and Bob wherever you get your podcast. Or the best thing to do, download that free Odyssey app. Listen anytime, anywhere.